And thank you, Council, for joining us for the second of our budget workshop briefings with Council. Tonight, we'll be going over the police department. It's only one department that we have on for tonight. However, we will have a supplemental presentation where Chief Smith will talk a little bit about CALIA accreditation. Earlier today, you all should have received by delivery to your residences a copy of some handouts from Chief Smith so that when he gives you a verbal presentation, he can refer to those documents and some of what's in there. With that being said, I will turn it over to Chief Smith. And as always, we also have CFO Gossett on the line, as well as Budget Manager AJ Soto, in case we have any very specific budget questions that dive down into some level of detail. With that, Chief Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. How's my sound? Our air conditioning is broke over here, and it's about 100 degrees in my office, and I have a big fan blowing on me from the door. Okay. If y'all bear with me, I'll be as succinct as possible, but there are some things I wanted to share with you, and I anticipate that you'll also have some questions for me, especially with the current climate in the country and everything going on with the police in general and our department specifically. What you see in front of you now is the first page of our business plan. For those of you, all of you are going to recognize the same format. We're slowly working to change it to kind of make it our own. And I do have some changes in this one from years past, but basically it's looking the same. First page is nothing remarkable. We still have the same amount of positions that we originally had for the last couple of years. If y'all remember, a couple of years ago, we added a full-time records person from part-time, made it full-time. And we also added a second animal control officer. So that's the only increases we have. So this page is basically straightforward. The thing I would love to stress and remind y'all that we are fully staffed with law enforcement officers. It's been the first time in 25 years. We remain fully staffed. I'm clearing the last 2 out of training within the month, this month. So we will have 67 full-time sworn solo police officers, which is one heck of an accomplishment. And for those of y'all that are wondering, is this because of COVID and downturn in the economy? That's not the case. These people that are clearing training now started processing a year ago. So this has nothing to do with the tight job market. I'm also happy to report I have 6 applicants pending, and 3 of them are waiting for us no matter how long it takes. They're not going to apply anywhere else. And then I have an additional 19 or 20 that their applications are in. So once again, it's a good problem to have, and it's a credit to the 7 council members, the city manager and his staff, and my current staff, because they have all done a fantastic job, and y'all have done a fantastic job supporting us and helped me fill up this police department. And we are one of the very few that are full, completely full now in this area. Next slide, Jacob. I'm going to go real brief over pages. You can hold there, Jacob, 2 through 6. This is basically a breakdown of what every division and every specialized unit costs and what they do. Of course, we start off with the patrol division. Next slide, Jacob. Then we move on to the traffic unit, the K9 unit, the part-time police officer program, which is really, I would like to put in a plug for that. Bang for the buck. It's an awesome program, the part-time police officer program. And we may have some here coming up. Detective unit, detective division, and then the different units, GIU, then SIU, Cape, next page, Jacob, and then downtown Cape. And this is a holdover from the last city manager who liked to show you what each unit costs and what they do. Then we go to the services division. You have ancillary, then you have communications, records, keep going, Jacob. Property and evidence, accreditation, and I want you to take note of that. That is a lot of money under accreditation, 98,618. But I guarantee after we have our next presentation, it is money well spent, and I think you'll feel that way if you don't already. Animal control officer, of course, we now have 2, which has really helped us. Thank you to council for giving me a second officer. And then we go into next slide, Jacob, the parking unit, which is funded as an enterprise fund, community service officers, of course, our wonderful volunteer program, and then police administration, which is basically myself and the people up front here. So that's all I have for the unit costs, and basically it's just a rehash. I can't make it exciting. That's about as exciting as it gets. Our budget did remain relatively flat this year, and we'll talk about that. Department highlights, next slide, Jacob. This is just some of the things we accomplished this year, and on further pages, it'll be broken down to a graph as our goals. It's everything from the top to our response times, all the way down to our crime prevention and community relations program, with a lot of things in between, from DUIs to citizens police academies to everything else that we do. Everything UCR related, Uniform Crime Report related, is just interesting, is way down in 2020. And there's no doubt in my mind it's due to COVID. But it's a good problem to have. For instance, we made 1,000 arrests for the same period last year. This year we're down to 600. I'm not resting on that. I think it's going to go back up once this thing rounds the corner. And I think we'll be slammed again, but we're fully staffed, so that's good news. Next slide, Jacob. I'd like to point out that our customer service surveys that we take quarterly and tri-annually, once every 3 years. We only have 1% that really don't like us. And I'm surprised it's not higher with the number of people we arrest. But most people, as you can see, are happy with the job we're doing. And in this field, that's pretty rare to have a rating so high. Even some of our arrestees compliment us, not very many, but some. Like I mentioned at the bottom of the page, our crime stats are down for this year. But make no mistake about it, that is just a nationwide trend that is consistent with COVID. But in many big cities up north, the homicide rates and the shootings have gone through the roof. And I'm not going to go any further in that. I can expand on that privately with each one of you for my reasoning behind why I think they've gone up nationally. But generally, crime nationwide is down, except for the shootings and the violent crimes in a lot of big cities have spiked through the roof.
Chief, can I just
Next,
ask a question?
Absolutely.
Just while you're on this page, so you're referencing COVID, but the numbers that we're looking at here only go to 2019. So are you saying that there's further decreases that you're already seeing for 2020?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm so sorry, and that's comparing the Uniform Crime Report from 19 to 20. And the numbers are still going down. Does that answer your question, Ms. Hoffman?
It does, but I mean, there was seems like a pretty good drop between 18 and 19 too, which wouldn't have been COVID related. So any indication on that, or?
I think it's the last, from the Memorial Day incident we had in, I believe, 2012, and we surged officers every weekend for 4 or 5 years. I believe people started to get the message. Because 90% of our arrests are from in town, and most of our criminal activity, at least violent crime and burglaries, are coming from in town. So that's my theory. I can't prove it, but I think us just relentless in the downtown area and on the streets help drive those numbers down. And also, once again, that's not just our efforts. Remember, crime stats. It's a socioeconomic, demographics, economy, and I will never ever trade credit for a drop in crime. And conversely, I will hope you not blame me solely for a rise in crime. So there you go. Did that help you out?
It does. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Next page. Okay, this is our performance measures. I think we can do better with these performance measures. They're from a bygone era. We've reached all our milestones. For instance, there's been a study in Baltimore where response times have nothing to do with reducing crime and criminal activity. It is something to measure. I will add that it's difficult to measure what police do sometimes. Of course, you have lots of data, but a crime prevented, it can't be measured. For instance, when we're down on First Street on a weekend, doing a lot of vehicle stops, and we're seizing 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 guns during a summertime period, we cannot measure how many crimes we prevented, shootings, robberies, from stopping those and seizing those guns, or preventing a crime, or being omnipresent. And a criminal says, I'll try a different city because there's too many police out here and they're too active. So it's very difficult to do what we measure what we do sometimes. I can give stats to you all day long, but another thing we have working against us, we're not an average city. We're kind of unique because we're smaller, but we just blow up on the weekends and during the summer 4 to 5 times our population size, vibrant downtown area. It really is difficult to measure what we do, but these are our milestones, and I'll talk more. I'm changing that, and we'll talk more about that in the future here in a couple minutes. Jacob, next slide, buddy. Okay, this is what I'm moving to. I got a motivation from our city manager, and we're working towards goals that are not just stats, not just numbers. They really will increase the quality of our workforce, our retention, our recruiting, our service to the citizens, but they're difficult to measure. So this is my first stab at this sheet, these goals. These will go in next year, next budget year, October of 22. But this is just to give you a sample of what we're working on for our goals, to change them from response times to, I think, more applicable to the current work environment we're in. And this document took myself and Jennifer Zunkavich 3 months to refine, and it still needs some more revisions. But this is basically what we're looking at for our new goal starting here in a year. Now, I will caution you, each of these goals have performance measures. They're not in here because the document would have been 5 pages long. This closely mirrors my work plan, my personal work plan, and each performance measure has a measurable goal at the end. For instance, I'll give you one. Okay, the very first one, I work with the city administration, communications manager, which is Jacob, and human resources to expand the department's social media and online presence. That's a goal. In my work plan, I have the actual measurement, which we'll install to the business plan next year. Expand the department's social media and online presence by working with the communications manager to establish a dedicated JBPD Facebook account and rebuild the police department website by the 3rd quarter of fiscal year 2021. So that way it's measurable, and each of these have a measurable goal, milestone that we'll have to reach, and they're already on my work plan. This closely mirrors my work plan. something very interesting, what I did, inspiration from the city manager, I formed work groups with all the different divisions and sections in the department, and kind of like what y'all are doing with the citizens and Mike did with the employees for Epic, the Epic team. I charged them with telling me what's important to the citizens and the employees. So they worked for 3 or 4 months, gave me a lot of input. I kind of summarized it, added my own twist to it, ran it by Mike, making sure it was approved. And this is what we came up with. And I really think they're rock solid goals to treat everything from how we treat our employees. If you go to the next page, Jacob, to specific goals on how our operations work, how we communicate with our citizens, how we prepare for operations. So this is what we're moving to in October 2021. And by this time next year, you'll have the performance measures all listed out so we can evaluate our performance on how we did. And let me give you one more example. I'm okay on time. On recruiting and retention. Recruiting and retention of our civilian and sworn employees affects every aspect of our operations, from our training budget to our recruiting budget, to response times, to morale, to turnover, to maintaining quality employees and not having a workforce of all one-year employees, knowing that when I was a one-year employee, I made a lot of mistakes, I broke a lot of things, and it required a lot of coaching. So it really affects budgeting. If we can take care of our employees on the front end, I think we won't be penny wise and pound foolish on the back end, and continue to be a preparer for the best police employees in the country that everybody loves to steal from, because they know Jack's Beach hires the best, trains the best, has high standards, and they'd love to hire people away from us. And it's all it's doing is costing us money and time and sanity. So that's just one small example of a goal that's more relevant to today's workforce. Do I have any questions on that so far?
Yeah, Chief, I just want to say I really like this. I smiled when I looked in the book, and a concern that I mentioned this yesterday is that our performance measures haven't changed in years, and they don't really mean anything anymore, and they're not aligned with what we're trying to do. And I was at the presentation when Mike kind of gave the Epic presentation at the end, and at that presentation, it was also brought up that you guys were doing something very similar within the department. So I appreciate this. I look forward to seeing how it's going to revamp in your department for next year when it comes to goals and measures and understanding better what the organization does. For Mike, I would like to see this across the board, and I know that you're working on it. I'm sure that you're working on it, because that alignment is going to be critical. The only caution that I will give, and it's just it's a small caution, is how you're going to compare year to year to year. Because anytime you change a measure, you got to start somewhere. So it's going to be year one. There's no previous year comparables. And that's something that there's going to be a new council. So there's going to need to be a little bit more explanation, I think, for them when it comes to understanding why did we stop using them if we have all of these years of these same measures. Why did we stop using them, and how do I compare? They're comparable, kind of. They're in the same groupings, but we're looking at it differently. So that's just my little caution for next year in the explanation, but I am thrilled that I'm seeing this. I love alignment. Organizational alignment. Everybody in the organization has something to do and to reach that goal. Need that. I can draw the picture if you like, but I won't.
Thank you. not for drawing the picture, but thank you for your comments. And I got a lot of this stuff when Mike came in. He gave me a lot of ideas. Basically, he gave me ideas and let me run with it. And under the last goals is I'm adding to maintain CALIA accreditation, because you'll see why soon why it's so important. And yes, we do have performance measures with all of these categories, and they're, like I said, it's on my work plan. And I'm smart enough to know that I'm writing goals I know I can accomplish. So a lot of these are already been accomplished, so which is good. Any more comments or questions?
Yeah, Jean Paul, I'd just like to add on to that. The reason that you see both the current performance measures or the historicals plus the new ones is exactly what Chief Smith said when he and I spoke about it. They're not completely vetted out yet. They're still a work in progress, but we wanted to use this year's budget as a transition year from the old metrics to the new performance measures going forward. So the decision was made that it would be best to show both of them, both the current metrics that we had been using for a number of years and where we're going as a police department into the future. Next year, the expectation is that the metrics that you're seeing on page 9 would effectively fall away and be replaced with a more detailed breakout of what you see on pages 10 and 11.
And so the police department's kind of a test run?
Beta tests, correct.
Yes. Thank you.
Great, no pressure. Thank you.
And as you've heard from some of the other departments, they're also in the process of developing longer range asset management plans. Beaches Energy is doing a strategic operations plan. Public Works is in the process of working up several plans as well. It'd be good for them to have those strategic plans under their belt before they start laying out what their goals and objectives will be going forward under a new format. So police department was ready to be the first ones, and they are the first ones to head in this direction.
Thank you. And if we'll move on, Jacob, next page, please, sir. Okay, this is, let me give a shout out to finance, because, you know, we're the ones that benefit from their hard work. This whole budget and everything is a result of their hard work. And I can't, and even the business plan, keeping us organized, keeping us on track. It's really the finance section that has done all the heavy lifting. I don't know what I'd do if I had to look at spreadsheets all day. It's really not my thing. So, and it's not just this page, it's really the whole document. They're fantastic supporting us. They're unsung heroes behind the scenes. The only thing I would draw your attention to is under general fund. At the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a 2.8% increase in our budget, and that's basically pay raises and pension. We receive no real increase, and I'm totally fine with that. I have what I need to operate. I think y'all know that I would tell you if I didn't, and I have. I'm thrilled to have everything that I have to run this police department. So it's a 2.8% increase overall. Under special revenue funds, this is Downtown Cape, the Downtown Cape budget. There has been no decrease. So one is we bought less overall, minus 11.8%. We just bought less cars for the next year. And also some of the people in Downtown Cape are less expensive than the employees that were in there last year. So that is just showing a decrease, but I guarantee you that I have everything I need to operate in Downtown Cape and more. The CRA has been very generous, as have y'all in the city, and I'm totally fine there. The last thing is the other funding sources, which are some of the grants. We're spending it on a lot of technology and equipment to take a burden off of general fund. Some of the grants for next year, it's still unknown what we're going to buy, but I'm trying to buy things to relieve general fund pressure for this year and for next year. We even switched a grant around this current year to where we're not spending it on overtime, which I don't really need. I'm spending it on stuff to take pressure off of the general fund for articles that we need to do our jobs. So it's really the same grants you see every year. They're remaining about the same. They really haven't decreased, but they're not as high as they were years and years past, 10, 20 years ago. Next page, Jacob. This is just some of the budget issues. Every year we buy vehicles. This year we're buying trucks. They're a little bit less expensive than the SUVs, believe it or not. We're doing a beta with the trucks this year. But you know, they're not making sedans, and I am flabbergasted by the price of these vehicles. I mean, I'm not a penny pincher, but they're getting so expensive. So we're buying cautiously, getting good deals where we can. And I think we have a pretty hardy and newer fleet. We're not driving a bunch of junk, which is the goal, because sometimes if you're driving junk, it costs you more in maintenance than it does to replace a car. So I think we're okay. And the city's been very generous providing us with vehicles. Downtown Cape, we're just buying one vehicle and a Segway this year. We're buying some technology with the next two grants and for next year, but we're still working through that process. But the amounts are valid, $9,100 directly from the federal government and $50,000 from the state. And I still have not decided what I'm going to recommend to Mike that we're going to purchase. But my goal is to buy things to take pressure off the general fund. But Mike, I would have had to go kicking and screaming to Mike to get anyway. So hopefully I'm saving him some money. He remembers me. Any questions on the business plan?
Chief, I know you've talked about license plate readers. Does any of that grant money, could that, any of that support the license plate reader?
That's an excellent.
Where do you see that? Where do you see that happening?
That's an excellent question. As I told you, I believe with the downtown camera system, I'm not going to preach to you, but everything we do has a cost, both hard and soft cost. And until I get this camera system up and running correctly, because the LPRs work off that camera system, I'm not going to add one more thing to this camera system till it gets up and running correctly. I think we're fixing to solve that problem with y'all approved it, I think a week or two ago, put an antenna on top of City Hall. I think the Margaritaville fiber will help us. And once I know that thing is up and operating at 100%, I'd like to add those LPRs. CRA is committed, y'all are committed, and Mike is also committed. I think it will change the way we do a lot of police work, and it will make us extremely busy. And I think it's an awesome tool, Ms. Golding. But like I said, we have a history of adding things on to current, whether it be any kind of project in the city, and we're not doing the front end work. So we just keep adding things on that don't work correctly or don't work optimally. So I put a freeze on anything adding on this camera system until it's up and running, which it should be here in a month optimally. It's working now, but it's supposed to work a lot better. And I think we're solving that problem.
No, I appreciate that. And thank you for the explanation. I think that's a very smart direction to go in. And I appreciate that.
I'm going to move on, Mike, with your permission.
If there's no other questions, we'll move on to phase 2 of your presentation.
Okay, I delivered a package, y'all. I wanted to give you a few caveats. I know this is a lot. And the conversation last night about short turnaround time. This is a document that y'all can review, and you can talk to me anytime in the future about. This isn't just a one-time shot. So even though it's a lot to digest, you just got today, I encourage you to look through it and we can discuss it offline, privately, in person, however you want. So this isn't the only time I'm prepared to talk about it. Also, the $100,000 we spent on CALIA, I think I'll convince you when it's done in the era of budget cuts that this is worth every dime, especially with the current climate in our country and in law enforcement. What I have, just to make you familiar with the packet I gave you, what I have is different sections, and they're all divided by a blue piece of paper. I didn't tab them, but you'll have, for instance, the first 3 pages, the first 2 pages. Don't forget there's printing on the back of the page too. And then you'll have a blue piece of paper. So I'll try to walk you through this. I've never done this kind of presentation remotely where I have handouts. So just bear with me. And if you have any questions or you're lost, raise your hand or whistle, or we'll take care of it. So this is twofold: to explain the costs we're paying for CALIA, and also to explain some questions y'all might have about law enforcement in general and the state of law enforcement in this country today. So the first one is the PowerPoint presentation that I intended to give you in the showcase. And on the back of the first page, this is what we're going to talk about in CALIA. CALIA is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. We're going to answer, what is it? Why is it so important? Who participates? Who does this? How does this relate to current events? And will there be any changes on how we operate in the future? I don't have the commanders on with me, but I do have accreditation manager, Lori Lavender. She's sitting right next to me at my desk, sweating like I am and patiently listening to me bloviate. So she's here to support me because she's a lot smarter than me. Okay, so also on the next page, we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you a little bit of knowledge, but I want to give you perspective. I can tell you about what we do, but I prepared samples of different reports and things we track so I can show you, to give you that perspective. So we have our assessment report, a response to resistance report, or use of force report. And it's kind of a wacky case, but we just picked it at random. And I got a whole database full of them if you want some interesting reading. A list of all the things we report, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions after we're done, so I left some time. So if you go to past the next blue sheet of paper into this sheet, it's on past the second tab, okay? It answers those questions. What is CALIA? It's an established set of professional standards, industry best practices in law enforcement. And there's an accrediting body, just like doctors or lawyers or colleges. They're accredited and they got to meet certain standards. So it's an established set of professional best practices for law enforcement. Why is it so important? It promotes efficient use of resources. It increases transparency. It increases accountability on us, that we're accountable to do certain things. It sets a course for success. This is very important. It doesn't guarantee success, but it sets the course. If you follow it, you will have success. Basically, walk the walk and talk the talk. It sets a course for that success. In general, as an agency, doesn't guarantee it, but if you follow it correctly, it'll show you where to go to be successful. It increases community involvement and advocacy. It's an objective measure, evidence of agency excellence. Remember, I said it's difficult to measure what we do. Well, this is an objective measure, evidence of our excellent agency. Strong defense against lawsuits, and it reduces liability exposure. This is why we very rarely get sued, and when we do, it's usually positive for us. Who participates? State and local law enforcement. They also have a corrections or jail accreditation and one for dispatch. We currently don't do the one for dispatch. We are only one of 728 accredited agencies out of some 18,000 nationwide. That's 4% of all agencies in this country are CALEA accredited, 4%. Out of those 4%, only about 20 agencies per cycle per year are awarded gold standard or more meritorious service awards. We've been every 4 years that we get awarded our reaccreditation, we've got either a gold standard or meritorious. So it's in the top 1% of the top 4%, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? My numbers might be a little off. I'm guesstimating, but 20 agencies per year get it. That's 80 agencies per cycle, and we're only 4% that are actually accredited. And we have been gold standard meritorious every time. Basically, we talk the talk and walk the walk. How does this relate to current events? Guys, this has been my sword and my shield for all the good ideas that everybody has for our police department. Some are good ideas, and I'm willing to listen. Some are misguided good ideas that with the best intentions. And I'll be honest with you, some out there are good ideas that have bad intentions for us. So I've been able to mount a defense, and it hasn't been that vigorous because I haven't been inundated with it. But when inquiry has come in, I've been able to mount a defense with all the things we do and all the things we regulate to answer their questions. Either we do it already, we track it, or it's not recommended by CALEA and we're not going to do it until it is. Or the IACP, which is the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or the Florida Police Chiefs. And y'all, that's who I take my guidance from. I try to educate, but it really has been my sword and my shield since all this started nationally. And what CALEA and accreditation does is become a culture. I answered an email from Ms. Golding, do we have de-escalation training? Well, of course we do. But most agencies do the training, the officers sit there for 8 hours, they check a box, and they go out and do something different. What CALEA has made us do is, over the last 25 years, it's become a culture to be transparent, accountable, to track the things we need to track, to do the right things for the right reason. It forces us to really instill this from the time you come on to the time you retire. It's become a cultural issue with us. That's why we're so good at it. So we do de-escalation training every time I talk to my officers in person, every time we have a class. It's included in our firearms training. It's included on the actual de-escalation class. All those things are cultural, from me telling the guys to be safe, be careful, do the right thing for the right reason. They understand what that means. Any changes in the future for the way we operate? I'm waiting for some suggested policies from CALEA, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which to my aggravation has been silent. My own organization has not said anything about some of this lunacy going on throughout the country. The Florida Police Chiefs, and I just wanted to add, y'all, of course, will give me guidance. But what we have basically is the law of unintended consequences with good ideas. I think the worst idea I heard is unarmed civilians doing traffic stops. I can't even tell you all the things that could go wrong with that, including the 30 or 40 policemen that are killed every year during traffic stops. That's a good idea that I'm not going to consider until CALEA or IACP comes out with some kind of guidance on it. And that's just one example of the law and unintended consequences. The next tab, you'll see this piece of paper with some highlights. Third tab, it basically says, as a result of CALEA accreditation, that's how it starts. As a result of CALEA accreditation, we track the following information for transparency and accountability. Lori and I just came up with this list. It was off the top of our head. This is not all inclusive, believe it or not. And I further pared it down to some highlights of things that might interest you based on current events. These are the things we track: traffic warnings and traffic citations by race and gender of violator, firearm discharges by race and gender of violator, total uses of force, and under that there's all types of categories. Personnel actions of my police officers and my employees, including suspensions, demotions, resignations, terminations, and other written reprimands and verbal counseling every year. It's all wound up together and reviewed, not just by me, but by Kalia. External citizens complaints. If you go to the back of that page that we were just on, agency breakdown of employees by race and gender. Officer early warning system, if I may spend 30 seconds on this. Early warning system sounds kind of like we're doing something wrong, but that's not the intent. With use of force, complaints, sick time usage, and a few traffic crashes, every year we review these categories. And if an officer meets a threshold, all the cases of whatever category, let's say traffic crashes, are reviewed. It doesn't mean the officer did anything wrong. It just means we're reviewing because it met a certain threshold, and we review all the cases, the officer's performance, talk to the officer supervisor. So 5 years from now, we don't look back and say, hey, all the warning signs were there. And we just didn't know it until now. Now looking back, we had a problem officer. What this also does is clears the good officers. And I told Mike a story earlier. I taught a class, a drug class years ago, and there was a conscientious young officer that I was pushing Kalia to the class. And drug unit commander got up and told a story. Young officer, physically fit, compassionate, honest, just smart. And he had his uses of forces were outnumbering everybody in the whole department, which was about 200 people. And because of this review, they looked at the numbers and said, what is this kid doing? Is he doing anything wrong? Well, it turns out he's on the drug unit. And it also turns out that he's the fastest runner in the department, most physically fit. So every time they did a drug sting or drug bust, guess where he was? On the takedown team. And everybody that ran, guess who caught them first? He did. And he got into a scuffle, a tasing, a fight. So they were using him probably a little bit too much for his talents. And they said, you need to rotate somebody else in there or get in shape and get your unit in shape, because this guy's going to get hurt. He's going to be disabled. His uses of force are going to stand out. So he didn't do anything wrong. He was doing a great job, but that basically allowed us to look a little deeper into the numbers every year to see if we do have problems. And the vast majority, there's no problems. For instance, Mike brought up an example of Downtown Cape. Downtown Cape historically has an early warning of a couple employees at least for use of force and complaints. And anybody who's ridden along down there knows exactly why they have a higher propensity to use of force and complaints down there, because the clientele they deal with sometimes. So moving on, annual analysis of our use of force, including trends, patterns, time of day, and then at the very bottom of the sheet, our customer service surveys. I'll point you to the next sheet, and it's just this sheet right here. This is all the things we have policies for. There's a boatload of standards, over 400 of things we have to address in our policy manual. These are just off the top of my head. I made this list up real quick, and I highlighted a few things that we have to have policies on, including use of force, arrest procedures, citizen complaint procedures, officer discipline, and mandatory, specialized, and advanced training, depending on your position. So these are all the stuff we have policies on. Our policy manual is about that thick, and it doesn't cover everything, of course.
Hey, Chief.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
With regard to the use of force complaints and the citizen complaints, how are those collected, or how do those come in? Because I was looking and I just happened to run across this, that Atlantic Beach and Neptune Beach both have on their website, they have a link with information about how a citizen can file a compliment or they can file a complaint. So I'm just curious, because I don't know, how does that happen with our department?
Our policy says we will take any kind of complaint, whether anonymous, by phone, in person, or by email, period. And it can be anonymous. We also do have it on our website. It's not the easiest place to find. I confirmed with a couple people and found it myself. i.e. why I want to redesign our website. It is on there, and we're very open about our complaints, and we must take all complaints. And we also have a pamphlet in the lobby to put it out there. But if you're not familiar with our website, it is a bit hidden. It doesn't jump out at you.
Well, I have to admit, I didn't find it. So, because when I saw it on the other sites, I did look, but maybe I didn't look hard enough. I don't know.
You didn't. It's on there. I verified it when you asked that question. And a use of force complaint is just a complaint, whether it's a use of force complaint, rudeness, inappropriate action, illegal activity, profiling, whatever, that's a complaint. The use of force is a review that can turn into a complaint if it's unnecessary use of force. So I don't want to go too deep into that because it's a very involved process, but I got some examples.
Okay.
The next tab is just one of the reports we do for CALEA. This is an excellent example. This is just one of the many of all the different things we track. So when somebody says you need to track something else, I kind of like nails on a chalkboard. I don't think I could review or track anything else, but I'm sure there's something out there. The first page I highlighted with a star is tracks traffic stops by race and gender. If you turn the page, the front of the next page, use of force by weapon or physical technique, by race, gender, and by firearm, taser, baton, so on and so forth, all the way down. I'm not going to go into depth into these. This is all the things we track. It's public record, and CALEA reviews these every year, and we review them every year. Next page is just a breakdown of all our different methods of use of force. Pie charts. The next page after that, skip 2 pages, and I'd like to send you to the back of page 8. And it has personnel activities, suspensions, demotions, resignations in lieu of termination. And we do track that. That stops the officers from going from department to department, problem officers. On the next page, 9, is our internal affairs function. It gives you some numbers and complaints, how they were found.
Hey, Chief, just real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
When I was reading this earlier today, I was just wondering, what is the other in the personnel actions? What falls under that?
It could be retraining. It could be temporary relief of supervisor duties till you get retrained. It could be go back through field training with the field training officer. It could be an informal counseling, which is just, hey, that was dumb, don't do it again. It could be numerous different actions, corrective actions that we take. Cool.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
On the back of page 14, this is demographic information of our agency, of our employees. How are they made up by race, gender, and ethnicity? And that I blew through it, but that's just one report we do to measure a lot of different things. And there's a dozen of these that would fill a binder. If there's no questions, I'm driving on. Next tab, you'll see a memo from Tommy Crumley to Lori Lavender.
Hey, Chief, I just want to make a statement real quick because
ma'am.
you mentioned this in the police panel, and I liked seeing this data, but you did mention that we definitely we have diversity in our department that exceeds the diversity in our community, and I'm glad to see that.
Yes, ma'am. And I will add that I hire the best person for the job. But yes, that is nice to see. And that says a lot of other things below the surface. It might suggest that we're a very diverse, accepting agency, and we're a good agency where minority candidates want to come in and work for us. You know, it's just an assumption, but all the division commanders review stuff every year, automatic review, early warning. This is the early warning memo, just a sample that Tommy Crumley does as patrol to Lori Lavender, and it shows use of force and the breakdown of the types of force. And it's just a simple example. And if you look on the next page, it has charts and it has by year. Our use of force seems to be going down, which I have some theories about that. And this is just one memo that on one topic that one division commander does and that creates the report that you just saw in the tab prior. So it's pretty thorough and it is cultural. It starts at the lowest level and goes all the way up through me. That we're accountable and transparent. Okay, the final, I saved the best for last. This is called a response to resistance report. Okay, if this is one use of force in one arrest, and I want to take you through some of the things, the steps we take to document a taser usage. Of course, on the first page, it's called a response to resistance. The officer is Corporal Martin, downtown Cape, and this was a taser usage. And there's a lot of other descripting information that we have to fill in there. Back of the next page. Back of the next page. The subject was homeless. We redacted his name. He had a visible injury under his right eye, and we explained that. It also says that he went to UF Health, and we also have some witness information in there. On the front of the next page, the words, the narrative, this is what basically happened during the encounter. And his name was redacted, but everything else is good. He had some choice words for the officer. As you can see, the officer is an African-American officer. He ran from the officers. He ran a lifeguard station, ran upstairs, jumped off the second-story balcony, and kept running. And then we had to tase him. So this is just, I didn't pick this for sensationalism. This is just a day in the life of a Jacks Beach policeman. At the bottom of that page, you can see Jason Sharp reviewed everything and signed off on it. The division commander, Mark Evans, signed off on it. And I must have been out or out of town and he signed off on it for me. But usually I'll review everything and do a third sign off on it. So it goes from a first line supervisor to division commander to me. And then it gets filed. If you turn the page, there are also two officer witnesses, Jason Lamont and Chris Carter. And there was a third officer witness, Dennis McVicker. So they all write what they saw. If you turn the page again, you'll see a taser printout. If you see on the right-hand side, it has the exact usage. The taser was used on June 5th. It was a trigger pull for 5 seconds. This guy cannot claim that we tased him 20 times. We do a printout. If you turn the page again, this is a general offense report. I'm just paging through it real quick. Every arrest requires a general offense report that's more detailed. On the back of the general offense report, it looks right there. It's about 3 or 4 or 5 pages back. I just wanted to show you what I highlighted. It says that we document that he was transported to UF Shands. He was in the back seat kicking at the windows on the ride down there. And of course, the racial slur at our officer. I want to point you to the next paragraph that we pulled the camera footage and reviewed it from the lifeguard station. So this is all we do to review one tasing. We do all this stuff to review it, including pull video if we have it. I want to show you something interesting also. He was checked out by Rescue 71. Towards the end, you'll see witness statements. Anytime there's a civilian citizen witness, we have them write out statements of what they saw, what the officer did, what the suspect did. So later on in court, or if this guy comes in and files a complaint, I can literally say, excuse the slang, bring it. I got 3 officer witnesses. I got video. I got multiple fire rescue personnel witnesses. I got written statements from witnesses. And I also have, at the very end, photographs. We photograph everybody we use force on. That's the taser where the taser hit on his back. He had an injury to his toe from running from us. We documented that. His back, where we tased him, back and buttocks. And the side view. There's also a lot more pictures in here, guys. I didn't want to give you a frontal view of him just for privacy, but we do a full frontal view. And so if he turns up with a black eye tomorrow, it didn't happen from us. It might have happened at the jail, or it might have happened after he got out of jail, but it wasn't us. And we document all pre-arrest injuries, all post-arrest injuries. We get a medical attention. So that was just for one use of force. We review it. If gosh forbid, we shoot somebody else, the binder is that thick and there's 2 or 3 of them. So that's basically the value that CALEA brings to us for the budget piece, for the $100,000 we're spending. It's every dollar of that $100,000 is so well spent because it protects us, it protects the city, and it makes us it forces us to do the little things that when we get busy, we don't purposely ignore, but it makes us do those little things because if we're not forced to do it, we won't do it just because we're busy. And it really protects us, sword and shield, from all the good ideas and the national climate out there. It really is a pathway to excellence. So that's all I have. I tried to be as succinct as possible. Does anybody have any questions? Or are y'all done with me?
No questions. I just gotta say, GP, I've always been a big fan of the department, but this was actually a very good exercise to help us see in much more detail what's involved administratively in all the work that goes on. You and your guys have a lot to be proud of, and we're all certainly very proud of you guys. But this little extra book that you put together meant a lot to me, and those kind of details and seeing those details gives me a better appreciation for what you guys are doing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mayor.
I agree with the mayor as well. After some of the incidents and stuff, I've had citizens asking me questions, and this definitely helps me to be able to speak to the. I knew a little bit about CALEA, but I can definitely speak to it more now. And I think this was great. Thank you so much for putting it together. I mean, I've done the Citizens Police Academy, but this is not something that I think is ever covered in the Citizens Police Academy. So
it's kind of dry, and that's why we don't cover it. But it's very important. And once again, what I showed you is just a very small. It's not even 1% of all we track and do, and it's just become second nature to us. But thank you for your comments.
And Chief, no, I really appreciate everything you guys are doing. And, everybody that I talked to, it just seems like morale is just so much higher now than it was even a couple of years ago. I just think you're doing a fantastic job. And, I just really think Jacksonville Beach is just coming a long way just in a short time. And I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. I'd like to take credit for it, but it's all of y'all, the city manager, his office, and and my staff, I've said it, I'm the luckiest police chief in the country because I have support below me and above me, and I'm the luckiest chief in the country, but thank you.
Good deal. We're going to keep you for a very long time.
Well, okay, yeah. It'll be a while. Thank you.
Chief, I just want to echo everyone's comments. Just going through an actual case was so eye-opening because we hear about CALEA every year because I'm sure it's something you have to defend in the budget every year. I know it's something you have to defend every year, but to actually see the accountability measures that are in place there was really, really helpful. So thank you for taking the time to do it. And I just think we need to brag on our department more. And you guys hear it from me all the time. Like, we need to put this out there. We need to show the community the good things that we're doing as much as we possibly can. We have to help drive that narrative for our own police officers and everyone in our department, really.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman.
And yes, echoing what everyone else has said, I've been involved with this peripheral with interviewing by Khalifa and stuff over the years. I want to, and you all are doing a great job, but I really want to give a shout out to the records group. I spent years in the records department back when they only had a part-time person. And Lori, you're doing a great job too over in your corner.
You said thank you.
They really do a lot of work, and they follow up when things are missing. They're the ones who do all the whiteout, and nobody really thinks about them. And so they are really doing a great job, as you can tell with this report and the accreditation as well. But my hat's off to the whole department. But special place for the records team. They really do a lot.
I agree with the records, and that's why I went to the only position I went after as chief was a full-time records position. And I went real hard at Mike and Karen for pay raises for them because they're not really records clerks, Ms. Dumont, you know that. They really are records specialists. And it's a very difficult and tedious job. And there's a lot of civilian support that goes unheralded because the sworn officers get all the credit, but it really is a team effort. Thank you all for your comments.
I just wanted to add something to piggyback on what Ms. Hoffman said with regard to the communications and telling the story of the good things that our police department is doing. I think that's so important because if we don't tell the story, somebody else is going to tell it, and they're not going to tell it properly. So I think we definitely need to be doing that and doing it more and better.
Agreed.
That was one of the reasons for giving this presentation tonight as part of the budget workshop for the police department. There's just been such heightened national conversations about police departments and a lot of very emotional responses, I think, from communities across the nation. Rather than talking about what is going on in other communities, it was much more appropriate for us to talk about what we're doing within our department, the goal and direction that we've already set for it, and the accomplishments that they're already achieving by having that CALEA accreditation for a quarter of a century. Like you said, it is more important for us to tell our story, where we are, where we're going, and how good we are as a department, rather than responding to what's happening in another community 1,500 miles away.
Would as y'all as graduates, would y'all think y'all could stomach a half a night on CPA with this, or do you think it would be? Okay, I'm getting yeses. Okay, maybe we'll add it, Mike. I think it's certainly timely. So
I think it would be great as part of the CPA class.
okay.
Are there any other questions or comments from council on our one item for tonight's workshop? Hearing none, thank you all for participating in tonight's budget workshop. And our next one is scheduled for next Monday at 5 o'clock, where we will be covering public works, planning and development, and redevelopment. Thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you for y'all's support.